Hey everybody, it's Matt. Welcome back to the Journey Church podcast. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you can automatically get our weekly episodes. And you might want to go ahead and subscribe to our Journey YouTube channel as well. You'll find messages, music, interviews, inspiring stories, and more for you all right there. Now, I hope this episode helps you take your next step in following Jesus. Today, here's what I want to do. I want to start with a question that I think all of us can relate to. Now, the question is simply this. Have you ever made a great decision and then you couldn't make it stick? Have you ever made a great decision and couldn't make it stick? The answer is yeah, all of us, right? We all have. This is one of those deals. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not a Christian. We all fall into this camp. We all understand what this is like. I think the question is, why do we do this to ourselves? It can be so frustrating because it's like, I want to do this, and you know it's going to make your life better, or you're really excited about it, it's going to improve something, and you make a decision to do it, and then you can't follow through. It's like, what in the world? It's so frustrating. Why do we do that to ourselves? Well, there are a couple reasons I want to suggest that cause this to be so difficult for us. The first one is simply this. It's human nature to return to bad habits once the pain is gone. Isn't that true? So if the doctor looks at you and says, you got to change some things about your lifestyle, or you're going to have heart issues, or you're going to end up with diabetes, man, the motivation initially to change is pretty high. Or if you run into a tough time in your life, you're going through a hard season, or this happens a lot of times, your kids are going, if you have kids, your kids are going through a hard season. What often happens is, we got to get back in church. We got to get back in church, so people get the kids back in church, which is not criticism. I love that. I think that's great. But as long as the pain is immediate, it's easy to show up at church, but after a few weeks when the pain goes away, then it's harder to get there. Or this happens a lot. Some of you are college students. Some of you remember when you were in college and the advisor called you in and said, hey, if you don't do something about these grades, you're not going to get into the program you want. Or if you don't do something about these grades, you're not going to graduate on time. When I went to Murray State, I had a guy I knew that was kind of an acquaintance. He was a friend, but not close. But it took him 7 years to get through Murray State. 7 years. He now lives in a van down by the river, as a matter of fact, in case you're wondering. No, I'm kidding. He's doing just fine. He's gainfully employed. He's got 42 more years of student loan payments. But, it was like, I don't know. This is going to take this guy forever to get through. Some of you may have been there where you had that conversation. It's like, if you don't pick the major and stick to it and make the grades, you're never going to get out of here, And the reason is because it's simple. We're all motivated in the moment to do something. But as the pain begins to subside, as it doesn't feel as urgent, well, then the motivation to stick with it begins to subside as well. Pain is a really great motivator to create change in the moment. It is not a great motivator to sustain change past the moment. Now, the other reason that I think it's hard for us to stick with great decisions that we make is that the pace of transformation is slow. This is certainly true as well for all of us. This is true in the positive. This is true in the negative. The reality is if you decide you're going to start eating healthy, you know this, you spend a whole day eating things that you really don't want to eat, or you weren't excited about eating, and you wake up the next morning and you look and you look just like you did the day before, don't you? And the scale says you're exactly like you were the day before, and so you're like, well, what's the point? Well, that's part of the problem. The pace of transformation is always slow. Same thing with studying, if you're like, okay, I'm going to get these grades together, and you say no to your friends who are going out to party or going to play, video games or whatever, and you spend the night studying, you wake up next morning, the grades are the same. If you've ever tried to pay off debt, you really know what this feels like. If you ever tried, you got this debt and you're like, okay, I'm finally going to tackle it. Well, the first payment you ever make on a debt feels a lot like this. I don't know if you've seen this video of this guy dumping gravel into this. I've got a feeling, I don't know, my guess is he went home and said, honey, let's find another job, because he was going to be here to the end. Some of you, this is what it feels like, doesn't it? Because the pace of transformation is always super slow. It's true on the positive side. It's also true on the negative side, which is what's really dangerous. If you, just simple example, if you decide, I'm going to work out and take care of my health, and then you wake up one morning and go, nope, don't feel like it, I'm skipping the workout. Well, you don't wake up the next day and have any negative consequences for that, do you? You look the same, you feel the same, okay, I can do it again. The slide downhill is always slow, just like the progress uphill is slow. There's an author by the name of James Clear who wrote this book called Atomic Habits, and he had a great perspective on this. Here's what he wrote. He said, it is so easy to overestimate the importance of one defining moment And he says, underestimate the value of making small improvements on a daily basis. Have you ever done this? I certainly have. It's like, oh, I'm going to change something. I got to make some big swing and do some big deal, and then everything's going to be changed. No. We always underestimate the value of those little things we do every day, and we overestimate the one big swing that we make. Clear goes on to write this. He says, too often we convince ourselves that massive results require massive action. We put pressure on ourselves to make some earth-shattering improvement that everybody's going to notice, i.e. diet and exercise, right? We often seem to dismiss small changes because they don't seem to matter very much in the moment. He says, unfortunately, the slow pace of transformation also makes it easy to let a bad habit slide. And I love his perspective on this. He goes on and he writes, it's only when looking back, this is what makes it so hard, it's only when looking back 2, 5, or 10 years later that the value of good habits and the cost of bad ones become strikingly apparent. I mean, this is a reality, and it's just because of the world that I live in. The first thing that came to mind when I read that, and this is not you because you're here, so congratulations. But what happens a lot of times is I watch families with kids, and they get caught in a schedule and all the things going on the calendar, and it's totally understandable. But they end up sporadically at best being at church, and they don't have their kids here on a consistent basis, building relationships with people, building trust with people who can invest in their lives. And again, they've got good motives and they got good reasons, and they care about their kids' faith, and they want their kids to have a faith that lasts a lifetime. And all this happens until, middle school, high school, and you know the story, right? And all of a sudden, the kid starts running into some issues, having some behavior issues, making some unwise choices, whatever it may be. And we get the phone call. It's like, hey, we need you to da-da-da, and can we? And we're always like, yeah, we'll do everything we can to help. The problem is, now you're 2, 5, 10 years down the road, and you didn't realize those choices were having this impact, but now there aren't other adults in their life who have enough trust to be able to say the hard thing to them, and they listen. And so, yeah, we'll start building that, but you can't flip that overnight. That's going to take some time. This is true in any area of life. And then this last statement that he writes, if you don't get anything else this morning, it's probably worth your time. He goes on to say this, every action you take is a vote for the person that you wish to become. Every action you take is a vote for the person you wish to become. So think about the actions you took this week, and you can ask yourself the question as you look at that collection of actions, okay, how many of those actions actually move me in the direction of becoming the person I wanted to be? Because every action you take is doing something to who you are. It is shaping the very nature of your identity and your behavior. So this is, if you haven't been with us, this is the final week of this series we've been in called Better Begins Here. And a quick summary for all of us. In week 1, we talked about the fact that whenever we want to get better, the reason we're not better in an area is because there are things holding us back. And so I asked you the question, what are you holding on to that's holding you back? It's so odd because in many cases we know the answer to that question and yet we can't let go of it. And you got to figure that out. You got to let go of some things in order to move forward and be who you want to be or become better in the areas you want to become better. Last week we talked about the importance of upgrading your circle. Like you also have to be surrounded by some people who either are better where you want to be better or they're at least wanting to get better and move in the same direction that you want to move. Because you're not going to have a better marriage if you're around friends. All your friends have miserable marriages. You're not going to have better grades if you're around friends who never want to study and don't really value that. I mean, you get that. That's common sense. Somebody said to me afterwards, it's really common sense. I'm like, yeah, but we have a hard time doing that, don't we? We just don't pay attention to our own circle and the influence they're having on us and the direction they're taking us. And sometimes we don't need to kick those people out of our life. We just need to add some new people into our circle, some people who want to be better where we want to be better. Today, I want to talk about this third component of better. This third component of how do we stick to the decisions we make? How do we, when we say, okay, I'm going to do this because this really matters to me and I've got to grow and improve in this area. I'm going to do this because my faith matters. I want to feel closer to God. I got to do this because this relationship matters and I want to be stronger. I got to do this because I want to have financial peace, and so I got to change some things I'm doing. How do we stick to those decisions? How is it not one of those deals that, oh yeah, this is so urgent, and then as soon as the pain subsides, we just let it go? Well, if you can't stay focused the whole time, lucky for you, I'm going to go ahead and tell you the answer right now, okay? Here's the short version of it, the secret, if you will, to sticking to great decisions. The key to better is changing something that you do daily. This is all there is to it. The key to better is changing something you do daily. You're never going to get better in any area of life unless something about your daily routine, your daily habits begin to change, because habits create actions, and actions shape not just your behavior, but they shape who you are and they shape who you become. The problem is, again, figuring out how to develop those habits and stick with them on a daily basis is not so simple. The Apostle Paul, all the way back, is around AD 48. He's writing a letter to Christians in the region of Galatia. And if you don't know the context behind this, there were a lot of churches that Paul had helped start in this region. When you think Galatia, think like West Kentucky, okay? That kind of region. So he'd helped start all of these little churches around this region. And these people had begun following Jesus, and Paul had explained to them, when you follow Jesus and when you actually begin to do what Jesus asked you to do and manage the different areas of your life the way he asked you to, your life will get better. And so they had begun doing this. But they ran into, Paul left, went on and started churches in other places, so he's no longer around. And they began to run into the thing that we've all run into. They began to run into the question, is it worth it? Because again, what I do today, I want an immediate reward tomorrow, and it's not the way it works in life, is it? So they begin to wonder, is this really going to pay off? I mean, I'm trying to follow Jesus, but it's hard and it's difficult, and especially in their culture where these values were so countercultural, it was very difficult to practice this on a regular basis. Nobody was encouraging you to be loving and kind and generous and all of that back in the first century. So they're starting to think, is it really worth it? Is it going to pay off? And word gets back to Paul. These Galatians are getting frustrated. They're beginning to become a little discouraged, and they're not sure if they need to keep following Jesus and all this is going to pay off in the end. And so he writes them a letter, and in this letter, he uses part of it to address this frustration or this concern or this question that they have. And he addresses a principle that I think is really important for all of us as we're trying to become the people that God created us to be. Here's what he wrote in part. He said, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. And what he's talking about here is he's going, okay, Galatians, I told you this when I was there. There are some principles that this world operates by. And you cannot assume, don't get deceived and assume that they're not going to apply to you. Don't assume I can do whatever I want and there aren't going to be consequences down the road. Don't assume, hey, that applies to them, but it doesn't apply to me. He's going, no. God set some principles up, and you're not going to work around it. You're not going to avoid it. Eventually, all these principles are going to catch up to you. They're all going to be true in your life. And he names specifically one of the principles he had taught them. He says a man, or really it's generic for a human, a person reaps whatever he or she sows. Now, just real quick, this is not something that explains everything that's happened to you in life. Like, there are things that you've experienced that are not because of a decision you made. But you know what a principle is? A principle is something that is generally true. A principle is something that you give it enough time in life and it's going to prove itself to be true. Not in every instance, there are going to be exceptions, but in general, this is what always happens. And so Paul had taught them, one of the general principles of life is, whatever you sow, you're going to reap. Whatever actions you take, you're going to either reap the benefits or the consequences of those actions. A man always reaps, a person always reaps whatever they sow. It's just the way life works. So the reason Paul had taught them that is because he wanted them to pay attention to the seeds they were sowing in their life, to the decisions they were making, to the actions that they were taking. He says, you got to pay careful attention to that. He goes on, he writes, whoever sows to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. Now, that's a little difficult to understand, but basically all Paul was saying was this. When you sow to please the flesh, that's his way of saying, if you choose to live your life prioritizing you above everyone else, that doesn't mean you're not kind to other people. It doesn't mean you're not good to other people. It doesn't mean you're not generous to other people. It just means you always choose to put yourself first. It's the mentality of, I'm going to take care of me, and then when I've got whatever I need and I've done all I wanted to do, then I'll look at you. Paul says, okay, whoever sows to that kind of seed, whoever prioritizes themselves first, they're going to reap destruction. In other words, eventually that kind of approach, that kind of behavior is going to destroy the hopes and dreams you have for not just who you want to be, but the kind of relationships you want to have. On the other hand, he says, whoever sows to please the Spirit, well, all that means is I'm actually going to prioritize God and others before myself. I'm going to put them first. Not that I'm not going to take care of me, but I'm going to think about others before I think about me. Paul says, whoever does that, sows those kinds of decisions, will reap eternal life, which, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, he's not referring just to, you're going to end up in heaven one day when you die. He said, no, whoever lives that way is going to come to know Jesus better. Whoever lives that way is going to experience a life full of love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. All the things that are true of God. All the things that are true of his Spirit. So the Apostle Paul's like, you got to pay attention, because whatever seed you sow results in what you experience, to which you might go, well, wait a minute. The problem with this is it's disproportionate. It feels that way to me. I take care of myself first, and all of a sudden it's going to destroy all this stuff. That seems a little extreme for the choice I made back here. Or, vice versa is also true. I put others first, and this is all I'm going to get to benefit in the process. It doesn't seem like it adds up. It's not a one-to-one ratio. It's not fair. And Paul would go, absolutely, nothing about this principle is fair. But nothing about farming is fair either, is it? You see, the same thing is true of farming is true for us when it comes to the actions we take and the behaviors we engage in. First of all, you reap what you sow. This is just always true, isn't it? Nobody plants corn and gets soybeans. We all know it doesn't work that way. Well, you can't plant certain decisions in your life. You can't make certain financial decisions that are irresponsible and then expect to end up in a place where you have margin and peace with your finances. But we think it ought to work that way, don't we? It's like, well, I know, but I was in a situation. And the Apostle Paul's going, no. I mean, you would think somebody's an idiot if they planted corn and expected soybeans. Well, you're not being very smart. You're not being reasonable if you make these decisions and expect a better outcome than what you're getting. You reap what you sow. You reap later than you sow, just like farmers plant and then they have to wait. This is part of it, right? The pace of transformation, either good or bad, is really slow, which is why it's hard to stick with the good things. It's why it's easy to make the poor, unwise choices, because you don't wake up the next morning and there are consequences. And you also reap greater than you sow. You plant a seed of corn, and you get 800 kernels of corn per ear in return. Now, I was hesitant to bring that up. I researched that, but we have so many of you ag reps in here that I was like, I'm probably wrong on that, and you're going to say, not with my product. You're getting 12 anyway, so, meet me in the atrium afterwards. But you get the general idea. When you plant a seed of corn, you don't just get one kernel of corn back, do you? You get a disproportionate return on what you have planted. And the same thing's true in your life. This is just a principle. It's a principle. It's a principle you can leverage for your good, or a principle you can leverage for your demise. Depending on the actions you and I take, and depending on the seeds we sow, we may get to a point in life where we reap something far greater than we ever deserved. Or we may experience consequences much harder than we think we deserve. For example, if you're in high school and you decide in high school you're going to prioritize your faith, not many high schoolers are doing that. But you say, no. I'm going to develop a habit as a high schooler of spending time with God every day and getting to know Jesus better. And you spend your high school years doing that, and you get to college, and college, everybody's got their freedom, and they're wanting to explore their freedom and do their own deal. But you're like, no. I'm not going to use my freedom for all the ways most college students do. I'm going to use my freedom to figure out God's purpose for my life and begin to invest in that now. Well, you're planting a lot of seeds, and you don't see a lot of results from that. As a matter of fact, it feels negative, if anything, because other people seem to be having a lot of fun, and here you are, it's like, why are you so serious, and why are you taking this so seriously? But you know what happens when you begin to plant those seeds? Is over time, you get out of college, you go get a job straight out of high school, however that works for you. And you end up in a situation where you're going to your first job and you're way ahead of everybody else. You're way ahead of everybody else because you've developed life skills that they didn't take the time to develop, and you're responsible and mature in ways that they're not responsible and mature. And you see the world in a way that's way different than the average 21-year-old sees the world. And if you want to get married, guess what happens? You end up marrying somebody who has the same values you have, because listen, as a single adult, you do not attract who you want, you attract who you are. And because you put that much time into growing yourself, you end up attracting somebody who also has put that much time into it. And you end up with a marriage where you're valuing the same things. It's not bumpy and rocky at times, but man, you're starting to figure it out. And then you have kids, and you're investing in them, and you're teaching them the same thing that you took time to learn when you were in high school. And all of a sudden your kids are growing up. Again, it's not bumpy and rocky, but there's a foundation there that keeps anybody from veering too far off the path. And your family has a totally different experience because it's all centered around the same central value of pursuing and following Jesus and his purpose for your life. And then your kids grow up and they want to be around you because you've got such a great relationship with them, because you made such wise decisions for all those years when it seemed difficult or challenging. And now you got this extraordinary family experience as you get older. And lo and behold, oh my gosh, when the house is empty and nobody else is around, you actually still want to be with your spouse. You know, it's like, will you put enough time into it that you're not having to get to know them all over again? No, you've been making all these decisions, moving in the same direction through life together. And you get to a point, at some point in the future, where you look around and you go, I don't know how I got here, but I don't deserve all this. I don't deserve to be in this position financially, relationally, with my kids, with my spouse, you name it. I just don't deserve to be here. I don't know how I got here, but this is incredible. Well, the reason you got there is because way back you started planting seeds and you're finally reaping all the benefits of them. But it didn't happen overnight. It took time. Now, for 99.9% of us, we would go, well, that is not my story. It's not my story. I was not that intentional. I was not that focused. I didn't make those kinds of decisions that early. And the beauty of the whole deal is that's fine, because Jesus offers us this thing called grace, which means at any point, while you can't change your past and you can't change what you're reaping from the seeds you sowed a year ago, 10 years ago, you can change the kind of seeds you sow today, which means you're going to reap a very different future. And God has a way of redeeming all that stuff in the past. That's the beauty of grace, that we can all end up experiencing better than we deserve by following him. But it's not easy. And it's not easy because it's not quick. It takes a lot of time. And most days you're wondering, I don't know if this is worth it. I don't know if this is worth it. I don't know if this is worth it. Because you don't see much progress. You reap later and you reap greater than you sow, which is why the Apostle Paul ends this little section by encouraging them. He says, all right, because of all this, let's not become weary in doing good. I'm just tired. I don't know if it's working. I don't know if it's worth it. He's going, okay, just don't give up. Don't get discouraged in doing good. For at the proper time, we'll reap a harvest if we do not give up. Now, for some of you, that may be the exact encouragement you need today, because you have been trying to sow the right seed, make the right choices, develop the right habits, but you just wonder, is it worth it? I don't know. You're not seeing much change right now. You're not seeing it pay off. Things may actually feel worse than better at the moment. And the Apostle Paul would look at you and say, just keep trusting what Jesus promises you. Just keep doing the next right thing. And for some of you, you're sitting in a situation where you're reaping the consequences of some decisions that you had no idea brought these consequences along. And so now you're trying to navigate some really challenging relationships with your kids, or a really sticky marriage situation, or the dream that you had, the door seems to have closed. You don't know where to turn or what to do now. You may be trying to dig your way out of a financial hole, and you're like, I don't think we'll ever fill that hole up. I don't think we can get out of it. And the Apostle Paul would say to you, no. Do not be discouraged. Just start sowing different seeds, developing different habits, doing the next right thing. And if you string enough of those together, you are going to see a change in your life. Because you know what momentum is? That's what we all want in life. Momentum. Momentum in the right direction. Momentum is just a series of small wins. That's all it is. So, back to the statement that James Clear made. He said, every action you take is a vote for the person you wish to become. So here's the question I want to leave you with today. The question is, what habits will create actions that vote for the person you want to become? In other words, let's not bite off more than we can chew, but what's one habit that you could begin to put into your life on a daily basis? Because the key to better is changing something you do every day. What's one habit you could put into your life that would help move you in the direction to becoming the person God created you to be. Maybe for some of you, it's time with God. Okay, I'm gonna try to spend a few minutes every day reading my Bible and praying. Because you've never done that consistently. You've never invested that much in trying to get to know Jesus better. So maybe for you, that's it. Maybe for some of you, it's grabbing your calendar and saying, I'm going to take control of my own schedule. We're going to take control of our schedule as a family. Because the reality is, and I'm not criticizing anybody, but the reality is you have given control of your schedule, your family's life to other people. It's maybe the boss has control of it, or the coach has control of it, or the school, I don't know. But you've given control to somebody else, and you're just so busy running all the time. Y'all don't have any time as a family. You are not doing anything as a family you envisioned doing when you wanted to have kids and were thinking about having a family. Maybe you just need to take back control and say, we're going to control this, and we're going to carve out time for each other, and we're going to invest in our relationship with each other. Maybe for you, it's, hey, I'm going to attend church consistently. I'm just going to start there. I'm just going to explore faith or try to grow in my faith by showing up consistently because I need the inspiration and the encouragement. Maybe for you, it's I'm going to try to give, save, and spend. I'm going to try to live on a budget, in other words, and I'm going to prioritize things the way Jesus says to prioritize them. And I don't know how it's going to pay off, and it seems like I'll never get out of the mess I'm in, but I'm just going to try it and see if over time I see progress. Maybe for you, it's I'm going to make a habit of forgiving, because unforgiveness or bitterness or resentment is wrecking relationships. If you look back over your past, you don't really realize it or think about it until you get to this point, but you look back and you're like, oh my goodness, there are all these relationships I used to have that are dead now, or they're awkward now. It's because you didn't forgive. I'm not saying you trust them, but you've never forgiven. And maybe for you, it's just a habit of, you know what, every time I get hurt, I'm going to choose forgiveness, as hard as it is. I'm going to choose to forgive. Maybe for you, it's a habit of spending time more consistent with your spouse, habit of spending time investing more in your kids. I don't know what this looks like for you. It's different for everybody. But when you think about the person that God created you to be, the person you want to become, what's just one habit you could put into your life? That every day when you did it, it was you voting to be that kind of person. It was you choosing to move in that direction. Now, I want to help you. And research actually backs this up. I want to help you. If you pick that habit, then all you need to do is say, I'm going to try to, if it's something that takes some time, it's like, I'm going to try to do that for 5 minutes a day. That's it. I gotta get in shape. My health is a mess. I can't even enjoy time with my family. I got to figure it out. Fine. Sign up for a gym and say, okay, my goal is to go to the gym every day. Work out? No, it's optional. I'm just going to walk in, I'm serious. They've done research on this. I'm just going to walk in, wave at everybody, say hi, turn around, walk out. Or, hey, I've never been able to read my Bible consistently. Fine. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Every day, say, you know what, I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to read for 5 minutes. At the end of 5 minutes, I'm done. I don't have to do any more. If I don't want to, I've won. Now, you know what they found? The reason this is so important, you're like, well, the bar is so low, that would not create any change. That's fine. You remember what momentum is? It's a series of small wins. Every day when you start a new habit, you got to feel like you're winning. Because there are some days you'll open up your Bible and read, and that timer will go off at the 5-minute mark, and you'll be like, no, I'm so into this, I'm going to keep going. And then there are going to be some days where you open up that Bible, and every minute you're looking at it going, are we done yet? Because it's just, you got things to do, you can't stay focused, it's fine. Some days you're going to show up at the gym, you're going to want to put a full workout in. Some days walking in the gym is all you can do. It's perfectly fine. You need to feel like you checked the box and you won. And when you set a simple, low goal, it actually motivates you to push in the direction you want to push. So I'm not asking you to do something extraordinary. I'm just saying, would you figure out what habit God would want you to put into your life to help become the person He wants you to be? And then make it really simple to meet it. Just make it really simple. And if you miss it a day, it's not a big deal. The goal is not to miss 2 days. You missed a day, that's fine. Just don't miss 2 days in a row. Don't miss 3 days in a row. But start doing it. Because what you're doing when you put that habit in your life is you're saying, God, I'm going to do my part, and now I'm asking you to do your part. I am planting the seed today. But as every farmer knows, no matter how much technology they have and no matter how much treatment they give it, if God doesn't give the right weather and the right conditions, they'll never have a big harvest. When you do this habit, you're saying, God, I'm putting the seed in the ground. Now I'm trusting you to multiply this exponentially in my life. Now, final thing, we'll wrap up. There's such a thing as a keystone habit. Have you heard of this? A keystone habit is if you do this one habit, all kinds of other things tend to fall into place and other habits become easier. I know a guy who learned for himself, this is kind of odd, he learned for himself, his keystone habit was flossing his teeth in the morning. He says, it's weird, but if I will floss my teeth, because he hates doing it, if I will floss my teeth, then I will get to the gym and work out. I'll make the hard decisions at work. He said, I'll do everything else because the hardest thing in the world for me is flossing my teeth. So if I do that, then I'm like, oh yeah, I can tackle anything else today. That's not going to be your keystone habit. But you need to find one. And I'll tell you, you choosing to follow Jesus, not believe in Jesus, again, that's good, but that's pretty easy. When you choose to surrender to Jesus and say, whatever you say to do in all the different areas of my life, I'm going to do it. That is a keystone habit that makes every single part of your life better. Because how Jesus says to manage your finances and your marriage and your friendships and your relationships and your career and on we could go. How he says to do that will lead you to become the person you want to be. How he says to do that will change your character and help you be the person that you want others to see you as. So, if there's an area you've been holding back, what if instead of trying to tackle this on your own, what if you invited Jesus into the middle of it with you? And you said, okay, I'm going to develop this habit in my life, but I'm going to develop it around what you say to do. And I'm going to try your approach. And I'm going to let you begin to change me. When you open up the door and invite him in, he makes it easier to let go of what you're holding on to. It's holding you back. He'll surround you with the people who are going to encourage you to get better. And he will give you the power to stick to the habits you need to stick to become the people he created you to be. He created me to be. Better begins with him. So, wherever you sense God wants you to grow, take a step. Choose a habit. Change something you do in that area daily and invite him to be part of it with you. And remember, the pace of transformation is slow, but if you don't get discouraged, eventually you reap, not just later, but you reap greater than you sowed. Let me pray for us. Father, would you give us the power to do that? It is certainly not easy. Would you give us the grace when we fail? And that may be the most valuable thing for all of us, because we can all look back and see areas and situations and decisions where we just did not choose the right actions, we didn't sow the right seed, and in some cases we're dealing with the consequences of it. But your grace is always there for us, so thank you for that. Help us to remember that. And would you continue to give us the ability just to surrender to you and invite you into whatever it is you're wanting to do in us to help us be the people you created us to be. That's in your name we pray. Amen. Hey, if you'd like more content like this, subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our Journey app to access all of our recent message content. And our app is the easiest way to share this content with a friend. For more information on our church or to find our app or our YouTube channel, just visit JourneyCalway.com. That's JourneyCalway.com. Thanks for listening.